Debate on Kivumbi 2017, just a few hours to the repeat presidential election tomorrow, even as tensions continue to flare across the country. Chief Justice David Maraga will lead the Supreme Court today in determining a petition before the Supreme Court to postpone tomorrow's election. It is a petition that has been termed as urgent by the Chief Justice despite today being declared a public holiday, a petition whose ruling is likely to influence the fate of the country just hours to the repeat presidential election. But opposition leader Raila Odinga today will also give a big announcement to his supporters on the way forward after withdrawing from the presidential race. He has, however, clarified on the BBC yesterday that the opposition has not called for its supporters to demonstrate on the day of the election, but only asked them to stay away. What influences this change of heart? Because just last week, Raila Odinga was quoted as saying they will be the mother of all demonstrations this Thursday. Let's get more insights from our panelists here in studio. Mark Bichachi, who is a political analyst, and Joy Brenda Mdivo, lawyer and political analyst. Joy, it remains unclear whether Raila Odinga will wait for the decision of the Supreme Court today, because they are listening to several cases to make his big announcement or his big declaration. Let's begin with what you're expecting from the Supreme Court today. The fate of the country now lies in their hands.
First and foremost, the Supreme Court laid a very terrible precedent, in my opinion, when they started bending the rules with the politicians, extending time, registries opening till midnight and whatnot. Because what we see now is we've had the last, 50 how many days since the declaration by the Supreme Court, and everybody waits until this week to start filing all these cases. I mean, last count was what, about 12 cases filed so far? It's absolutely ridiculous. And then the court entertaining them and going out of their way to try and make everybody comfortable. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's something in law that says it aids the vigilant, not the indolent. So if you're lazy in dragging your feet to get to court and you find the doors shut, they should be shut in your face. But that being said, because they've already allowed themselves to extend and enlarge time to accommodate everybody and to try and beat deadlines, one thing that would come out today is that because the judges have got such limited time to hear the matters and such limited time to bring out the rulings, I would not expect them to be very adventurous in their decisions. They will try and stick to the law as strictly as possible and not try to be adventurous in their decisions, because one, there's limited time, and two, there's not enough wherewithal to challenge, to appeal, to do what. So if they make a drastic decision, then there's no room, for example, for the IBC to go back and appeal a decision or for an aggrieved party to go back and appeal. So they'll try and play it safe so that whatever decision comes out is something with finality. What I do expect to come out of the courts today is a few bruised egos. Many people will be told, you know what, yeah, we're not listening to you anymore. That doesn't make any sense. So some matters will be thrown out. But even the ones that are heard, I do not expect anything that will be too earth-shattering. That said, I sat on the 1st of September looking at that decision, and I had thought I would see where the courts are going with this, and I was completely off the mark. So today I really stand to be guided, but I don't see them trying to to rock the boat too much, although I'm cautiously optimistic, let me say that.
Mark, what are you expecting from the Supreme Court decision today?
You know, let me tell you, the problem with Kenyans and our methods of litigating is sometimes our litigations border on the nonsensical. And I'll give you an example. There's been talk of a caretaker government. Caretake for what? You understand? Because, again, and I'll go back to my previous statement, the solution is not getting someone in power. That's not the solution. Because the problem that we have is a heart condition that has gone wrong. You understand? That's the problem. So it is like trying to solve a marriage by trying to buy as many roses as possible. There's nothing wrong with the roses. They grew just fine. There's a problem with our hearts as Kenyans. So that's one. So the litigation that has been filed there, for example, the environment is not conducive for an election. Question. Since 1992, Which environment has been conducive for an election in this country? By what standard will we judge a conducive environment? We've had elections in this country where there have been tribal clashes. We've had elections in this country where we stayed a whole month away from work into 2013 because there was a court petition. No one went to work. Everyone had to leave the entire month. So the conditions that you're saying, the conditions are not conducive now. When have they ever been conducive? What in history will we judge and say this is a conducive environment for Kenya? The truth of the matter is this. What Kenya needs to do, I wish we could file a petition and say how can we stop being nonsensical as Kenyans? Because what we need to deal with and what we are all running away with, these demonstrations that we are seeing are not about IEBC. They are about what these demonstrators feel is a breach of their rights and their Kenyanism. That is what it's about. It has nothing to do with the IEBC. Because today, I dare anyone who's listening to me to go and Google and find for me what are the reducible minimums for NASA. You will not find a single document that details all of them from them. What does that tell you? That the issue is not really about the IEBC. The IEBC is simply a focal point. And that tells you on the other side as well, let's remember that those who are for status quo are also not for status quo for the sake of status quo. It is an identity issue. It is we, our people, we as these people from this place. That is really what the issue is. So this matter of elections and court cases are trying to cover up what is really rotten in our closets.
Right. So let's then take a look at this, the situations we're likely to find ourselves in, because depending on the decision of the Supreme Court today, we're going to have an election tomorrow or the election will be postponed. Let's take a look at both instances, because depending on what side of the political divide you're listening to, there's going to be a constitutional crisis either way. So if the election is held tomorrow, Mark speaks of a mark-up. This will be the beginning of a new chapter for the country, not the end, really, of an election period. What does it look like, Brenda, to have a presidency, which is a likelihood after the election, to have a president whose legitimacy is doubted by a vast majority or a large chunk of the population?
What we have with this scenario actually is exactly what you've said. We'll have an election that is legal, that meets all that threshold, but lacks in legitimacy. And the legitimacy will not be because the person being, the people who are conducting the election didn't do a good job. It is because the people who are supposed to make the decision are split. So you have some people who do not participate in the process and therefore steal the legitimacy away from the entire process. We had this problem in 2007 where you had Kibaki installed as president, but majority of the country, or rather the people who felt that this was a switcheroo, having that feeling of, you know what, this, and I think that's where even this term of stealing elections, that was the first time we started hearing it coming out very clearly, stealing elections, like it is chattel. But now, moving forward, I think it's one of those things where the Jubilee government has gotten to a place where right now they don't even care about legitimacy anymore. It's just, let's get this over and done with. We've been around this mountain long enough. Whether it's legitimate or not, let's put an end to this going round in circles. And for me, what that tells me is that being the government of the day, and with what we have seen, because there's some things we've seen with this particular government that, I mean, if it was in the Moi era, it would be shock on us. For example, how does the government lose a case? I think about the days of Moi. That was not even something that was fathomable. The instructions would have come long before on how this goes. Even, and not just a Supreme Court ruling, even the cases prior to. There's been a lot of leeway from this government to sort of try and play things by the rule book. But now towards the end, the last 50-something days, what we've seen is it's almost been like a switcheroo. People have decided, you know what, now this, we don't care anymore. Let's stick to the side of the law. Now, why am I saying the side of the law? It's because as long as we do this election within 60 days, then, you know, if it is not legitimate, you can go back to the Supreme Court. If that doesn't work, they can nullify, we can start again. So in the Constitution and the laws, you can see where this would go, where this would end. there's rhyme and reason within the law.
Right, so back in the courts.
Yes, but on the other hand, if we decide, you know what, let's go for legitimacy. Let's not go for an election. Let's try and bring Kenyans together, this conducive environment that Mark is talking about. Let's try and have everybody on board and then organize an election. The danger that leaves us in is after the 60 days, then you have got this thing where everything is open to interpretation. Now, when we're in the area of everything is open to interpretation, then that's where the danger lies. Because at that time, the person with the instruments of power is still Uhuru Kenyatta. If he decides, you know what, this doesn't make any sense to me, I don't care anymore, boots on the ground, Parliament, you're disbanded, you guys go home, state of emergency, and then he pulls a Kabila on us. What are you going to do at that time? Or if, on the other hand, people said, you know what, we're not going to wait until 2022 for Uhuru to be removed. We are removing him today. We're occupying State House today. And people are up in arms. So that's the sort of situation where, no, it's not even a constitutional crisis. That's just a crisis for Kenyans, period.
All right.
And if you look at the economy right now, it's taken so many hits. And during the time we've been electioneering, South Korea has a new president. Even the Liberians are going to their round too. The Rwandans have done their thing. The Ugandans have removed their term limits. As in, the other countries have been moving on.
The world is moving on.
We are the ones who
basically
seem to be stuck in this mire. So when it comes to legitimacy, I think the politicians, the ones on the Jubilee side anyway, have got to a place they're like, you know what, this legitimacy thing we can do without.
All right.
Let's just get this over and done.
Let me get your closing comments, Mark. What impact is Raila Odinga's big decision likely to have, either way, on the country tomorrow?
As Joy said, you know, Raila's statement today has only two options. It has to be completely everything, that our lives will never be the same again after he says it, and maybe he'll say that he's a president.
For life.
Not for, I don't know for life, but he can declare himself president. He can say absolutely nothing. He can say, you know what, the elections tomorrow, I'm back in the race. At this point where Raila Odinga is...
He can even say, I've retired from politics. Yes. I'm going back to
where he is right now, he's like a cat. Have you ever chased a cat around the room? And it has options until you get it to a corner. And then when you get it to a corner, there's a look it gives you where you know you're not quite sure whether it has the capacity to kill you. And that's where we are right now. We've put Raila in a corner, and how he's going to react, he might either submit and you say, what? I'm out of this, or he might actually say, you know what, I know where your jugular is, and that's what I'm going to bite. But what is the most critical thing? The most critical thing for our nation is to understand that as a nation, we need to move forward. How do we move forward? We need to decide where are we all going. That's the question. Because we don't have that answer. We fight for individuals because we think this individual represents where I want to go. But the problem is beyond 2030, and most likely beyond 2022, Kenyans cannot see where they're going. What we need is a vision that brings us all together, where I can see my position in that vision, and therefore we are going together, and any leader who's going on that path, we will join them. Until we have that conversation, and it's not a Raila Uhuru conversation, it is a Michelle, Mark, and Devo conversation. It is a villager conversation. It is a town conversation where Kenya needs to sit with itself. You know how you call yourself to a meeting? Sit with yourself and decide, where are we going as a country? Can we deal with the things that we've always felt and said about each other but never really expressed? Because that's what's ailing our nation.
All right. So there's definitely a lot to wait for. Many thanks for joining us, Mark Bichachi, a political analyst, and Joy Brendam Devo is also a lawyer and a political analyst in our Dawn debate this morning. We're discussing options around Raila Odinga's big announcement, a big declaration today, just hours to the repeat presidential election. Take a short break here on Kivumbi 2017, but do stay with us. When we come back, get into our newsroom conversation. How has the Kenyan media covered the previous elections, and what are the expectations from Kenyans today and in this period as we cover this historic election? That conversation coming up in just a moment. Stay with us. This is Kivumbi 2017.